My sister Olivia kicked me out of our shared apartment for her boyfriend, thinking I would just accept it. As I stood in the hallway with my hastily packed bags, she smirked, "Enjoy finding a new place in this rental market." I smiled and said, "Thanks. I'll be enjoying the owner's penthouse upstairs that comes with my new building." Her face froze when she realized I wasn't joking. I never thought I'd be the type of person to keep such a massive secret. But life has a way of transforming you when you're pushed too far. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Meridian Heights, a mid-sized city with aspirations of metropolitan status, I always considered myself reasonable. I'm Eliza Chen, 32, the perpetual mediator, the one who searched for common ground when arguments erupted. My friends often joked that I should have been a diplomat instead of an investment analyst. I believed in fairness and second chances, sometimes to my detriment. I was always the person who tried to see the best in people, even when they repeatedly showed me their worst. My sister Olivia, however, operated by different rules entirely. 2 years younger at 30, she'd always been the hurricane to my calm breeze. Where I planned, she improvised. Where I saved, she spent. We were opposites in almost every way, from our career choices, my structured finance world versus her freelance graphic design, to our personalities. Yet, despite our differences, we'd shared an apartment in the Westlake district for nearly 3 years, mostly because the location was perfect and the rent, when split, was manageable even in Meridian's increasingly expensive housing market. The Horizon Apartments wasn't luxurious by any stretch, but it had character. Exposed brick walls, large windows that flooded the rooms with morning light, and a rooftop garden where residents gathered on warm evenings. Our 2-bedroom unit on the 4th floor had become home, with my organized minimalism somehow coexisting with Olivia's creative chaos. I'd chosen the smaller bedroom to avoid conflicts, letting her have the room with the better view and larger closet. That was our dynamic. I compromised. She accepted it as her due. Our arrangement worked more or less, until last winter when everything changed. The first sign of trouble came in the form of Dominic Reed, Olivia's newest boyfriend. Tall, with carefully cultivated stubble and an ever-present leather jacket, Dominic fancied himself an entrepreneur. In reality, he jumped between vague startup ideas while primarily living off a trust fund from his grandmother. Olivia was completely enamored, spending less time at home and more time at his downtown loft. I didn't mind the relative quiet her absence brought, and truthfully, I was happy she'd found someone who matched her energy. But then February arrived, and with it, an unexpected development that would alter the course of my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. It started with an email from our property management company, Corsica Holdings. The message was simple. The Horizon Apartments was being put up for sale. Residents would be given the option to continue their leases under the new ownership, but nothing was guaranteed. The uncertainty sent ripples of anxiety through the building, with neighbors stopping each other in hallways to discuss what might happen. Would rent increase? Would the building be converted to condos? Would we all be forced to find new homes in Meridian's brutal housing market? I brought my concerns to Olivia, who shrugged it off with her typical nonchalance. "If we have to move, we'll move," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Dominic says we could always get a place together if it comes to that." Her casual dismissal of our home struck a nerve. "We've been here 3 years, Liv. I like this place. I like our neighbors. I don't want to start over somewhere else." She finally looked up, rolling her eyes. "God, Eliza, you're so afraid of change. This is why you're still at the same boring job while I'm building my brand. Sometimes you have to take risks." I didn't respond. There was no point. Instead, I channeled my anxiety into research, diving deep into property values, investment strategies, and mortgage rates. As an investment analyst, numbers were my comfort zone, and the more I looked into the situation, the more a wild idea began taking shape in my mind. What if I bought the building? It seemed ludicrous at first. Me, owning an entire apartment building? But the more I researched, the more feasible it seemed. The previous year, I'd received a substantial inheritance when our grandmother passed. Money I'd initially invested conservatively. Additionally, my diligent saving and modest lifestyle had left me with significant capital. A meeting with my financial advisor confirmed what my spreadsheets had already told me. With the right loan, I could actually do this. For 2 months, I worked in secret. I created an LLC called Phoenix Rising Investments to maintain my anonymity. I met with banks, real estate attorneys, and finally, representatives from Corsica Holdings. The process was exhausting, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to take calls before Olivia emerged from her room, and I'd review documents late into the night after she'd gone out with Dominic. And somehow, against all odds, my offer was accepted. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I signed the final papers in my attorney's office, my hand trembling slightly as I wrote my signature on the line that made me the official owner of the Horizon Apartments, all 28 units, including the previously unoccupied penthouse on the top floor. I was now effectively my own landlord, as well as Olivia's, though she remained completely unaware. I'd planned to tell her that evening, to share what was simultaneously the most terrifying and empowering decision of my life. I'd even bought a bottle of champagne to celebrate, but when I returned home, I found her sitting at our kitchen island, an uncommon seriousness in her expression. "We need to talk," she said, and the familiar phrase sent a chill down my spine. Little did I know, my secret wasn't the only one about to be revealed, and the conversation that followed would test the limits of what I thought I was capable of. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I've always been the reliable one, the steady sister, the planner. Growing up, while other kids dreamed of becoming astronauts or movie stars, I was the 8-year-old who opened a savings account with my Chinese New Year money and created budget spreadsheets for my allowance. My parents found it amusing. My sister found it annoying. "You're so boring, Eliza," Olivia would complain when I declined to join her impromptu adventures. "Do you ever do anything without calculating the risks?" The truth was, I didn't. Risk assessment was my natural state. I approached life with caution, testing the water before diving in, while Olivia cannonballed into every situation without looking. Sometimes I envied her spontaneity. Mostly, I worried about who would bail her out when things inevitably went wrong. Our childhood home in suburban Meridian Heights was a comfortable split level with a maple tree in the front yard. Our parents, both professors at Meridian University, raised us with equal parts academic expectations and creative freedom. Dad taught economics, Mom taught comparative literature. Together, they created an environment where both their daughters could flourish, despite our different approaches to life. "Eliza plans to succeed," Dad would say. "Olivia succeeds despite her lack of planning." Mom was more poetic about it. "You're earth and air, both necessary, both powerful in different ways." I took comfort in these assessments. They made our differences seem complementary rather than contentious. And for many years they were. Olivia brought spontaneity and joy to my methodical existence. I provided the stability she secretly craved. Even after our parents retired to Arizona, leaving us to navigate adulthood in Meridian without their daily guidance, we maintained this balance. After graduating with my finance degree, I landed an entry-level position at Archer Capital, a midsized investment firm with offices in the gleaming Meridian Financial District. For 7 years, I built my career there, analyzing market trends, creating investment strategies for clients, and slowly climbing the corporate ladder. My work wasn't flashy, but it was intellectually stimulating and financially rewarding. I found satisfaction in helping people grow their wealth, in translating complex financial concepts into actionable advice. My apartment with Olivia was just a 15-minute walk from my office, close enough to commute comfortably, but far enough that I didn't feel like I lived at work. Each morning, I'd stop at Raven Coffee on the corner of Maple and Ninth, order the same drink, medium Americano, splash of almond milk, and arrive at my desk precisely at 8:15. My colleagues joked that they could set their watches by my routine. Don't. You ever want to shake things up? My coworker Yasmin asked once over lunch. Take a spontaneous trip? Call in sick to go to a concert? Anything? I smiled and shook my head. I like my life predictable. What I never told her, what I rarely admitted even to myself, was that my predictable exterior hid a deep-seated fear. A fear that if I ever lost control, even for a moment, everything I'd built would come crashing down. I'd seen it happen. To my uncle when I was 12. One bad investment, one risk too many, and suddenly his family was selling their house and moving in with relatives. The memory of his hollow expression as the moving truck pulled away had imprinted on me, shaped me in ways I was only beginning to understand. So I played it safe. I contributed the maximum to my 401k. I maintained an emergency fund with 6 months of expenses. I paid off my student loans early and avoided credit card debt. When friends from college bought luxury cars or took extravagant vacations, I invested my money instead. And when our grandmother passed away, leaving me a substantial inheritance, I approached it with the same careful consideration I gave all financial matters. The inheritance changed things, though not in ways visible to others. On the surface, my life continued as before. I still lived in the same apartment, wore the same sensible business casual attire, drove the same reliable sedan. But internally, something shifted. For the first time, I had true financial security, not just the ability to weather a job loss or medical emergency, but the power to make significant changes if I chose to. This newfound security coincided with changes at work. After 7 years at Archer Capital, I was promoted to senior investment analyst with a corresponding increase in salary and responsibility. My client portfolio grew, as did my confidence. I began to consider possibilities I'd previously dismissed as too risky, starting my own investment consulting firm perhaps, or taking a sabbatical to travel. What I didn't expect was that my first major risk would involve real estate. Despite my professional expertise with investments, property had always seemed like unfamiliar territory. I understood stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Buildings with tenants and maintenance issues and property taxes felt different, more complicated, more permanent. Yet when the email about the Horizon Apartments being sold arrived, something clicked. Perhaps it was the timing, my new promotion, the inheritance safely invested, the growing realization that I was capable of more than I'd allowed myself to imagine. Or perhaps it was simply that for the first time, I could see a problem with a solution that was within my reach. My initial research was cautious. Property values in the Westlake District, comparable building sales, potential rental income versus expenses. I created spreadsheets, of course, ran projections, calculated worst-case scenarios. But beneath the numbers was something less quantifiable, a feeling that this opportunity had appeared precisely when I was ready for it. The building itself was nothing special from an architectural standpoint, a 6-story brick structure built in the 1940s, renovated in the early 2000s to update the electrical systems and add modern amenities. But what it lacked in contemporary flash, it made up for in character and location. The Westlake District had transformed over the past decade from a forgotten corner of Meridian to one of its most vibrant neighborhoods, with independent bookstores, farm-to-table restaurants, and a weekly farmers market that drew visitors from across the city. When I finally made the decision to pursue the purchase, I told no one, not my colleagues, not my friends, and especially not Olivia. It wasn't just about maintaining privacy during a complex negotiation. It was about proving to myself that I could do something bold, something life-changing, without seeking validation or permission. For someone who had spent 3 decades making careful, measured choices, this felt revolutionary. Each step of the process, creating the LLC, securing financing, navigating inspections and appraisals, pushed me beyond my comfort zone. I faced questions I'd never considered before, made decisions with consequences that stretched years into the future. There were moments of doubt, nights spent staring at the ceiling wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. But beneath the anxiety was a surprising current of exhilaration. By the time I signed the final papers, I wasn't just purchasing a building, I was claiming a new version of myself. Eliza Chen, no longer just the reliable sister, the cautious planner, but now a property owner, a landlord, a person who could see opportunity and seize it. The weight of the keys in my hand as I left the attorney's office felt significant, almost ceremonial. I'd planned to share this transformation with Olivia that evening, to open the champagne and toast to new beginnings. I hoped she would be surprised but proud. That she might see me differently, not as her boring, predictable sister, but as someone capable of boldness. Instead, I found her waiting with news of her own, and the collision of our separate secrets would upend everything. The Horizon Apartments stood at the corner of Willow Street and Parkview Avenue, its red brick exterior weathered but dignified against the rapidly changing skyline of Meridian Heights. The building had character that newer developments lacked: ornate cornices along the roofline, arched windows on the ground floor, and a grand entrance with restored Art Deco tile work that always made me feel like I was stepping into a different era. Our unit, 4C, occupied the northwest corner of the 4th floor. It wasn't particularly large, about 1,100 square feet, but the layout made efficient use of the space. The living room featured tall windows that flooded the room with afternoon light, perfect for the small collection of houseplants I nurtured on the windowsills. The galley kitchen opened to a dining area large enough for the vintage oak table I'd rescued from a thrift store and refinished myself. My bedroom was the smaller of the two, with just enough space for a queen bed, a nightstand, and the narrow bookshelf where I kept my finance books and small collection of literary fiction. Olivia's room, by contrast, was a chaotic creative den. Her walls were covered with a collage of magazine cutouts, client mock-ups, and abstract paintings she created during her artistic exploration phases. Her desk was perpetually buried under sketch pads, colored markers, and her high-end laptop and tablet. Clothing spilled from her closet in a rainbow of fabrics and textures, while half-empty coffee cups frequently appeared and were forgotten until I collected them during my weekly cleaning. The apartment reflected our personalities and the delicate balance we'd struck over 3 years of cohabitation. The living room was a neutral zone, decorated by mutual agreement with a comfortable gray sectional, a coffee table I'd inherited from our grandmother, and a smart TV mounted on the wall. The kitchen was primarily my domain, organized, functional, with labeled containers and a meal planning calendar on the refrigerator. The bathroom we shared was perhaps the greatest test of our ability to compromise, with Olivia's cosmetics collection threatening to overtake my neatly arranged toiletries. Many ways, the Horizon wasn't just a building, it was a community. Mrs. Abernathy in 2A, a retired librarian in her 70s, collected packages for residents and kept everyone updated on neighborhood news. The Kumar family in 5B invited the entire building to their Diwali celebration each year, filling the hallways with the scent of homemade samosas and the sound of children's laughter. Marcus and David in 6D hosted rooftop movie nights during summer months, projecting classic films against the brick wall of the adjacent building, while residents lounged in camping chairs and shared popcorn. It was the kind of place that had become increasingly rare in Meridian Heights, as developers demolished older buildings to make way for luxury condominiums with cold marble lobbies and doormen who knew residents by unit number rather than name. The Horizon had soul. It had history. And now, unexpectedly, it was mine. All 28 units, from the ground floor retail spaces leased to a neighborhood bookstore and a family-owned bakery, to the previously unoccupied penthouse that crowned the building like a secret treasure. The penthouse was perhaps the most interesting surprise of my purchase. During my initial tour with the property manager, I'd been informed that the top-floor unit had been unoccupied for nearly 2 years, following a comprehensive renovation by the previous owner. It was intended to be the jewel of the building, a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom luxury apartment with a private rooftop terrace overlooking Parkview Park. But pricing had been too ambitious for the neighborhood at the time, and rather than lower the asking rent, the owner had simply kept it vacant, a strategy I found financially questionable. When I received the keys to the building, the penthouse keys were among them, small and gold, distinct from the standard silver keys for the rest of the units. I hadn't yet visited the space, saving that particular exploration for a moment when I could fully appreciate it. Perhaps, I thought, I would invite Olivia to see it with me after I shared my news, a symbolic gesture of including her in this new chapter of my life. Our neighborhood, Westlake District, existed in that perfect moment of urban transition, vibrant and evolving, but not yet completely gentrified. Locally owned businesses still outnumbered national chains. Families who had lived there for generations mixed with young professionals and creative types attracted by the relative affordability and distinctive character. On weekend mornings, the farmers' market in Parkview Park drew crowds searching for organic produce and artisanal breads, while evenings found the district's restaurants and bars humming with conversation and laughter. It was precisely this balance that had drawn me to the horizon in the first place, both as a resident and now as an owner. I had no interest in dramatically raising rents to maximize profits or replacing long-term tenants with higher-paying newcomers. My financial projections were based on sustainable growth, modest improvements to the building's infrastructure, and the preservation of the community that made the property special. Of course, my new role as owner would inevitably change my relationship with my neighbors. I hadn't yet decided how or when to inform the other residents of the ownership transition. The previous owner, Corsica Holdings, had operated through a property management company, Stellar Properties, maintaining a deliberate distance from tenants. I planned to retain Stellar's services for day-to-day operations, at least initially, but I also envisioned a more transparent and communicative ownership approach. What I hadn't anticipated was how my new status would first be tested not with a tenant dispute or maintenance emergency, but within the walls of my own apartment, with the person I'd been sharing space with long before I ever considered becoming a landlord. Olivia and I had our routines, the small daily orbits that allowed us to share space without constant collision. Mornings were choreographed carefully. I woke at 6:15, showered by 6:30, and was typically dressed and preparing breakfast by the time Olivia emerged from her room around 7:45, bleary-eyed and reaching for the coffee I'd already brewed. I left for work at 8 Allen sharp. She typically settled at her desk around 9:30, unless she was meeting clients at their offices or working from a coffee shop for a change of creative environment. Evenings were less predictable. My work hours were consistent. I typically arrived home between 6 on and 6:30, unless client meetings ran late. Olivia's schedule varied wildly, depending on project deadlines, social engagements, and her relationship status. Since meeting Dominic 6 months ago, she'd spent increasingly more nights at his downtown loft, returning to the apartment primarily to work, change clothes, or occasionally host dinner when his place was being renovated. This arrangement had actually improved our sisterly relationship in many ways. With more physical space between us, our interactions became more intentional and less friction-filled. We'd have occasional movie nights or cook dinner together when our schedules aligned. She'd ask my advice about client contracts. I'd seek her opinion on presentations when I needed a more creative perspective. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, a mature evolution of our childhood dynamic. Dominic, however, had begun to shift this balance. At first, his presence was minimal. He'd pick Olivia up for dates or occasionally stay over when they returned late from events. But gradually, his belongings began to appear around the apartment: a toothbrush in the bathroom, a phone charger permanently plugged into the living room outlet, a specific brand of cold brew coffee in the refrigerator. He began to use the chai, shower without asking, play music on our Bluetooth speaker without checking if I was on a work call, and eat food I'd prepared without offering to replace it. "He's just comfortable here," Olivia explained when I gently raised the issue. "It's a compliment, really." What she failed to understand was that his comfort seemed to come at the expense of mine. In my own home, or what I believed was my home, at least until the moment I signed the papers that made me the building's owner. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just as I secured ownership of the entire building, my authority within my own apartment was being incrementally eroded. It was as if the universe was offering me a cosmic trade: gain control of 28 units, lose control of your own. But I hadn't accepted that exchange. Not yet. Not until that evening when I returned home, champagne in hand, keys to the building in my purse, to find Olivia waiting with news that would force me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about our relationship. The look on her face when I entered the apartment should have been my first warning. A mixture of determination and carefully rehearsed casualness that reminded me of her expression before telling our parents she'd decided to drop out of business school to pursue graphic design. Olivia was preparing to drop a bomb, and judging by her carefully arranged posture at the kitchen island, she expected significant fallout. "I need your room." Olivia's words hung in the air between us, her tone matter-of-fact, as if she were asking to borrow a sweater rather than making an outlandish demand. I blinked, certain I'd misheard her. "Sorry, what?" I set my bag down on the counter, the champagne bottle clinking against my keys. "Your room," she repeated, gesturing vaguely toward my bedroom door. "I need it. Dominic's moving in." I felt a strange sensation, like the floor was subtly tilting beneath my feet. "Dominic's moving in? Here? When did we discuss this?" Olivia sighed, running a hand through her hair. Freshly dyed a deep burgundy, I noticed distantly, wondering when. That had happened. "We're discussing it now," she said with that particular tone of patience that was actually profound impatience. "Look, his building was sold to some corporate developer. They're terminating all leases in 60 days for a full renovation." My mind was racing, trying to process both the audacity of her announcement and the irony of the parallel to my own secret. Another building changing hands, another life upended. Except in my case, I'd been the one doing the upending, not the one being upended. "Okay," I said slowly. "So Dominic needs a place to stay. That doesn't explain why you need my room." Olivia leaned forward across the island, switching to the persuasive tone she used with difficult clients. "Because my room isn't big enough. For both of us and his design equipment. He has a full drafting table, 2 monitors for his digital work, and all his supplies. We laid it out every way possible, and it just won't fit with a queen bed in there." "So he can get a smaller bed," I suggested, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the anger beginning to simmer beneath my calm exterior. "Or store some of his equipment. Or, here's a wild thought, find his own apartment." Olivia's expression hardened slightly. "We want to live together, Eliza. This is important to me. To us. And your room is bigger." "It's not bigger," I corrected automatically. "It's the smaller bedroom. That's why I took it when we moved in, remember?" "It has better proportions," she insisted. "The layout is more conducive to his work setup." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. The sheer entitlement of it all was breathtaking. She wasn't suggesting we rearrange the apartment to accommodate a third person, which would have been presumptuous enough. She was effectively asking me to surrender my personal space entirely. "And where exactly would I sleep in this scenario?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Olivia brightened, as if this were the easy part. We've thought it all through. You can take the pull-out sofa in the living room for now. Just temporarily, of course, until you find your own place. The room seemed to go completely silent, as if all the ambient noise of the building had suddenly been sucked out. My own place. She wasn't just asking for my bedroom. She was asking me to leave. Until I find my own place, I repeated flatly. It makes sense, doesn't it? Olivia continued, words tumbling out faster now, rehearsed but still anxious. You're at a point in your career where you can afford your own apartment. You've always liked your space and privacy. And Dom and I are ready for this next step. It's perfect timing, really. I felt something shift inside me, a tectonic movement of emotion. The champagne I'd brought to celebrate my new ownership now seemed like a cruel joke. I'd been preparing to share news of my boldest move, only to be told I was being evicted from my own home by my sister. When? The question came out barely, above a whisper. That's the thing, Olivia said, glancing at her phone as if checking the time. His lease is up at the end of next month, but they're offering incentives for people to leave earlier. If he's out by the end of next week, they'll give him his full security deposit plus an extra $1,000 for moving expenses. She looked up, forcing a bright smile. So we were thinking you could pack up this weekend? This weekend, I echoed. 5 days from now. My sister wanted me gone in 5 days. I know it's quick, she admitted, having the grace to look at least somewhat apologetic. But you're so organized, I figure it won't take you long to pack, and you can store anything you can't take right away in my storage unit downtown until you find a new place. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. Olivia, this is my home too. We've lived here together for 3 years. I can't just leave in 5 days because your boyfriend needs somewhere to put his drafting table. Her expression shifted then, a flash of annoyance breaking through her carefully constructed reasonableness. It's not just about the drafting table, Eliza. It's about our relationship. We're serious about each other. You've been dating for 6 months, I pointed out. Sometimes you just know, she shot back. Not that you would understand, with your spreadsheets and 5-year plans for everything. The barb stung, especially coming on the heels of the boldest, least planned decision of my life, one she knew nothing about yet. But I refused to be baited into a typical sibling argument. This wasn't about my relationship history or planning tendencies. It was about basic respect and consideration. I understand knowing what you want, I said carefully. What I don't understand is why that means I have to be homeless by the weekend. Olivia rolled her eyes. Don't be so dramatic. You won't be homeless. You can stay with a friend for a few weeks if you need to, or get a short-term rental while you look for something permanent. With what notice? Rental markets in this city are tight, you know that. People wait months for a decent apartment. Well, maybe you should have thought about that before, she snapped, her facade of reasonableness finally cracking. I stared at her. Before what? Before you ambushed me with this demand? Before you got so comfortable living with your little sister that you forgot to build your own life? Her voice rose, color flooding her cheeks. God, Eliza, you're 32 and you're sharing an apartment with me. Don't you think it's time you moved on? Got your own place? Maybe even dated someone for longer than 3 months? I felt as if she'd slapped me. We'd had our differences over the years, but this targeted attack felt different, deliberate, designed to wound. And beneath the surprise and hurt, I recognized what was happening. Olivia was using guilt and embarrassment to manipulate me, to make her unreasonable demand seem like she was doing me a favor. This isn't about my life choices, I said, working to keep my voice steady. This is about you making a unilateral decision about our shared home without discussing it with me first. This apartment is as much mine as it is yours. My name is on the lease. I pay half the rent. More than half, actually, since I cover the utilities. Well, Dominic and I will cover everything once you're gone, she retorted. The full rent, all the utilities. We can afford it. That's not the point. I rarely raised my voice, but I found myself nearly shouting. You can't just decide I need to leave, especially not on 5 days' notice. Olivia crossed her arms, her mouth set in, a stubborn line I recognized from countless childhood arguments. I'm not asking, Eliza. Dominic is moving in next weekend. I need your room cleared out by then. The finality in her tone hit me like a physical force. This wasn't a negotiation or even a discussion. In her mind, the decision was made. I was being pushed out of my own home, with no consideration for my feelings or circumstances. For a moment, I considered revealing my news, telling her that I now owned the building, that technically she was the one who should be worried about her. Living situation, not me. The look on her face would be satisfying, a perfect reversal of the current power dynamic. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the realization that such a revelation would permanently alter our relationship, turning a sibling dispute into something much uglier. Or perhaps it was simple shock, my brain still processing the abrupt shift from celebratory anticipation to defensive anger. Instead, I took a steadying breath and asked, "And if I refuse? If I say no, you can't have my room and I'm not moving out?" Olivia's expression hardened further, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Then things will get very uncomfortable around here. Dominic is moving in regardless. His stuff is coming next weekend. If you want to sleep on the couch while he uses your room, that's your choice, I guess." The casual cruelty of her statement left me momentarily speechless. This was my sister, the person I'd shared a bathroom with for 3 years, who knew I hated cilantro and preferred my coffee with almond milk, who called me for advice when clients tried to negotiate her rates down. Yet in this moment, she was a stranger, cold and dismissive of years of shared history. "I see," I finally managed. I turned away, picking up my bag and the champagne bottle, which now felt absurdly heavy in my hand. Without another word, I walked to my bedroom, and closed the door behind me. Inside, I leaned against the door, listening to Olivia moving around in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of her making tea, as if she hadn't just upended my life. As if she expected everything to continue as normal, with the small difference that I would disappear to make room for her boyfriend's drafting table. I looked around at my carefully organized space. The neatly made bed with its gray and white, geometric duvet, the small desk where I sometimes worked from home, the framed black and white photographs of Meridian landmarks I'd taken during a photography class 2 years ago. This room had been my sanctuary, my private space in a shared life, and now my sister had decided it belonged to someone else. I set the champagne bottle on my nightstand and sank onto the edge of my bed, the weight of the day's events suddenly overwhelming. In my purse, nestled beside my wallet, was a ring of keys. Keys to every unit in the Horizon apartments, including the penthouse that had stood empty for 2 years. Keys that represented both a solution to my immediate problem and a complication I hadn't anticipated when signing the ownership papers that morning. For the first time since making the decision to buy the building, I questioned my own judgment. Had I overextended myself, taken on more responsibility than I could handle? Or had the universe, in its strange way, provided exactly what I needed at precisely the right moment? As the muffled sound of Olivia's phone conversation, undoubtedly with Dominic, filtered through the wall, I pulled out the small gold key to the penthouse and turned it over in my palm, feeling its weight and the potential it represented. Had 5 days to decide what kind of landlord and what kind of sister I was going to be. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in my bed, the bed that would soon be Dominic's apparently, and stared at the ceiling, my thoughts spinning like a hamster wheel. The champagne remained unopened on my nightstand, a mocking reminder of how quickly celebration had turned to crisis. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a cardigan over my pajamas, and padded silently through the darkened apartment. Olivia's door was closed, soft music barely audible behind it. Even in the midst of our conflict, she maintained her habit of falling asleep to ambient playlists. I grabbed my keys and left the apartment, careful to close the door quietly behind me. The hallway was dimly lit by safety lighting, the pattern of the carpet runner visible only as vague geometric shapes in the half-darkness. Instead of heading toward the elevators, I turned left, toward the stairwell. 6 flights up, slightly winded from the climb, I emerged onto the top floor. The penthouse occupied the entire level, its entrance marked by double doors of dark wood, with brass fixtures that gleamed faintly in the low light. I hesitated for just a moment before sliding the small gold key into the lock and turning it with a soft click. The door swung open silently, revealing darkness beyond. I fumbled along the wall until I found a light switch and flipped it on. What appeared before me made me catch my breath. The penthouse was stunning, far more luxurious than I had imagined from the property manager's description. The entryway opened directly into a spacious great room with floor-to-ceiling windows along the far wall, framing the Meridian skyline like a living painting. Even at night, with most buildings dark, the view was spectacular. Distant towers illuminated, the river a ribbon of reflected light cutting through the city. I moved further into the space, my footsteps echoing slightly on the hardwood floors. The kitchen to my right featured gleaming stainless steel appliances, stone countertops, and a center island large enough to seat 4. The living area to my left held no furniture, but the space was defined by a striking gas fireplace with a marble surround. A short hallway led to the bedrooms, 2, as mentioned in the property description, but both generous in size. The master suite included a walk-in closet and an ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub positioned beneath a window that I imagined would offer views of the morning sun. But it was the terrace that truly took my breath away. I unlocked the glass doors at the far end of the great room and stepped outside into the cool night air. The rooftop space wrapped around 2 sides of the building, offering panoramic views of Meridian Heights. Subtle lighting illuminated built-in planters that stood empty, waiting for greenery to soften their clean lines. A covered portion of the terrace housed a small outdoor kitchen and what appeared to be connections for a hot tub that had never been installed. I walked to the edge, placing my hands on the railing, and looked out over the sleeping city. My city, or at least a small piece of it that was now mine in a way I had never anticipated. Below me was the horizon, with its 27 occupied units, including the one where my sister slept, unaware that I stood directly above her, contemplating our future. The cool night air filled my lungs as I took deep breaths, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The penthouse represented a solution to my immediate problem. I could move here, into this incredible space that technically belonged to me. I wouldn't have to scramble to find an apartment or crash on a friend's couch. I wouldn't have to beg Olivia for more time or engage in a power struggle over my soon-to-be former bedroom. But the simplicity of that solution was deceptive. Moving into the penthouse would require explaining how I had access to it. That would mean revealing my ownership of the building. And revealing that would fundamentally alter my relationship with Olivia in ways I couldn't fully predict. I returned inside, closing the terrace doors behind me. In the emptiness of the great room, my options seemed to echo around me, amplified by the vacant space. I could picture how it might look furnished, comfortable seating arranged to take advantage of the view, perhaps a dining table near the kitchen, artwork on the walls to add color and personality. It could be magnificent. It could be home. But was I ready for that? I locked the penthouse and descended the stairs slowly, each step heavy with indecision. Back in my current bedroom, I curled up under the covers but remained wide awake, my mind churning with possibilities and consequences. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My boss, surprised but sympathetic, told me to take care of myself. I wasn't physically ill, but the emotional turmoil had left me drained, unable to face client meetings or investment analyses. Olivia had already left by the time I emerged from my room, but she'd left a note on the kitchen counter, Started packing some boxes for you. They're in the hall closet. Dom's coming over tonight to take measurements. Thanks for being understanding. The presumption of her note, the assumption that I had accepted her demand and would quietly pack up my life to accommodate her boyfriend, sent a fresh wave of anger through me. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, then opened the hall closet to find a stack of flattened moving boxes and packing tape. I slammed the closet door shut and stood in the middle of the living room, breathing heavily. This was ridiculous. I owned the building. I could evict them both if I wanted to. I could raise the rent to an astronomical figure. I could make their lives difficult in a dozen different ways. But that kind of petty revenge wasn't who I was. Or at least, not who I wanted to be. The power I now possessed came with responsibility, not just to myself but to everyone who called the horizon home. Including, complicated as it was, my sister. I needed guidance, perspective from someone who wasn't emotionally entangled in the situation. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I trusted to give me unvarnished advice. Yasmin, it's Eliza. Are you free for coffee? An hour later, I sat across from my colleague at Verdun, a small cafe 3 blocks from the horizon. Yasmin's expression had shifted from concern to disbelief to barely suppressed laughter as I recounted the events of the past 24 hours. Let me get this straight, she said, stirring her latte. You secretly bought your apartment building? And the same day your sister tried to kick you out of your apartment? I nodded, cupping my hands around my tea. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. And she has no idea you're her landlord? None whatsoever. Yasmin sat back, shaking her head. Girl, this is wild. Even for you, and I thought you were the predictable one. I smiled weakly. Apparently, I've been saving up all my drama for one spectacular explosion. So what are you going to do? She asked, leaning forward. Move into the penthouse and drop the ownership bomb on her? Evict her and the boyfriend? Pretend nothing happened and sleep on the living room couch like she wants? I sighed, running a finger around the rim of my mug. That's why I called you. I honestly don't know. Each option feels wrong in a different way. Yasmin was quiet for a moment, considering. What do you actually want, Eliza? Forget your sister, forget the boyfriend, forget the complications. If none of that existed, what would you want to do with this building you now own? The question caught me off guard. In all my calculations and considerations, I hadn't really allowed myself to think about what I wanted, only what made financial sense or what solved the immediate problem. I want to make it better, I said slowly, surprising myself with the answer. Not gentrified or exclusive, but better, safer, more comfortable, more of a community than it already is. I want the people who live there to feel secure, to know their home isn't going to be sold out from under them or renovated beyond their means. Yasmin smiled. Then start there. Be the kind of building owner you wish you had before you became one. Let that guide your decisions with your sister. But that doesn't solve my immediate problem, I pointed out. She wants me out by Sunday. Doesn't it, though? Yasmin raised an eyebrow. If you were just a tenant facing eviction by your roommate, what would you want from your landlord? The answer came immediately. Protection, fairness, respect for my rights. Exactly. Yasmin sat back, a small, satisfied smile on her face. So protect yourself. Be fair, to yourself and to her. Respect your own rights. But how do I do that without revealing that I own the building? Yasmin shrugged. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's time for some honesty between sisters. I looked down at my tea, watching the light refract through the amber liquid. The thought of confronting Olivia with the truth made my stomach clench with anxiety. Yet continuing this charade seemed equally untenable. She's going to be furious, I murmured. She'll think I've been lying to her, manipulating the situation. Haven't you, though? Yasmin's voice was gentle but direct. You kept a massive secret from her, And now you're considering using your secret power to solve your problem. That's not entirely innocent. Her words stung because they contained truth. I had concealed my plans, my negotiations, my ultimate purchase of the building. I had my reasons: privacy during a complex transaction, the desire to prove something to myself. But the end result was the same. I had hidden something significant from the person I shared a home with. So what do I actually do? I asked, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. Do I just blurt out, "By the way, I own this building now," the next time I see her? Do I wait until Dominic is there measuring my bedroom? Do I leave a note like she did? Yasmin reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I think you need to do it soon, before this gets more complicated. But how you do it matters. You're not just dropping this information to win an argument or assert dominance. You're sharing something important about your life, something you're proud of. Lead with that. I nodded slowly, feeling a plan begin to form. I could invite her to see the penthouse. Tell her I have something to show her. That's good, Yasmin encouraged. Make it about sharing your accomplishment first, not about solving your housing dispute. And then what? I still need to address the fact that she tried to kick me out. Yasmin sipped her latte thoughtfully. One revelation at a time. See how she reacts to the ownership news first. That might change the entire conversation about living arrangements. As I walked back to the horizon, my steps felt lighter. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I had direction, a framework for moving forward. I would show Olivia the penthouse. Tonight, reveal my ownership, and then navigate the aftermath as thoughtfully as I could. What I didn't anticipate was that Olivia would bring complications of her own to our long overdue conversation. I returned to the apartment just after noon, my mind clearer after talking with Yasmin. The living room was still empty, but I could hear voices coming from my bedroom. I froze, key still in the door, as I recognized both Olivia's animated tone and the deeper rumble of Dominic's responses. They were in my room, without my permission. While I was out, the realization sent a surge of anger through me so intense it momentarily blurred my vision. This wasn't just inconsiderate. It was intrusive, disrespectful, a violation of the already tenuous boundaries between us. I closed the door with deliberate softness, refusing to announce my presence with a slam, and moved silently through the apartment until I stood in the doorway of my bedroom. Olivia was directing Dominic as he held a measuring tape against one wall. A notebook lay open on my desk, filled with numbers and rough sketches. Several of my books had been moved from the shelf to the bed, and my closet door stood open, revealing that someone had been examining its dimensions. I'm thinking the drafting table could go here, Olivia was saying, gesturing to the space currently occupied by my desk. And then your monitors could— What are you doing? They both turned at the sound of my voice. Dominic had the grace to look embarrassed, but Olivia's expression was defensive, her chin lifting slightly. Oh, hey, she said, as if measuring my bedroom for its new occupant was the most natural thing in the world. I thought you'd be at work all day. We're just taking some quick measurements to plan the layout. In my bedroom, without asking me. While I'm not home? My voice was steady, controlled, but I could feel something unfamiliar crystallizing inside me. A hardness, a resolve that I rarely allowed myself to feel, much less express. Dominic glanced between us, clearly sensing the tension. Maybe I should go, he suggested, already rolling up the measuring tape. No, stay, Olivia insisted, placing a hand on his arm. We're almost done, and Eliza doesn't mind. Right, Eliza? The presumption in her question, the casual expectation that I would acquiesce as I always had, was the final straw. Something shifted inside me, a tectonic plate sliding into a new position, permanently altering my internal landscape. Actually, I do mind, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I mind very much, Olivia. This is still my room. These are still my things. And until I agree to move out, which, for the record, I haven't, you don't get to come in here and start planning your boyfriend's office space. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, unused to this level of direct confrontation from me. I told you he was coming over tonight to take measurements. It was in my note. The note said tonight. It's noon, and even if it were tonight, I didn't agree to it. Dominic cleared his throat awkwardly. Look, I really should go. You two obviously need to talk, and I have a client meeting at 2 anyway. He gave Olivia a quick kiss on the cheek and nodded politely to me as he passed. Nice to see you, Eliza. I stepped aside to let him pass, then listened as he collected his jacket from the living room and let himself out of the apartment. Only when the door closed behind him did I turn back to Olivia, who stood with her arms crossed, a familiar, stubborn set to her jaw. You're being ridiculous, she said before I could speak. It's just measurements. It's not like we were touching your stuff. I gestured to the books on my bed. Those were on my shelf. And that's not even the point, Olivia. The point is respect, basic courtesy, not treating me like I'm already gone when I haven't even agreed to leave. She rolled her eyes. You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. It's just a room, Eliza. People move all the time. Then maybe you should move, I suggested, surprising myself with the directness of the statement. If it's just a room and people move all the time, why don't you and Dominic find a new place together? Because we already have this place, she shot back. We like it here. And it makes more sense for you to be the one to leave. You're the one who's single, with no ties, who can live anywhere. We're a couple. We need the space. There was that word again. Need. As if her desires automatically constituted necessities, while mine were merely preferences that could be overridden at her convenience. I took a deep breath, centering myself. This wasn't how I had planned to have this conversation. I had envisioned something calmer, more controlled, showing her the penthouse first, revealing my ownership with a hint of pride, navigating her reaction with grace. Instead, we were having yet another sibling squabble, the same dynamic we'd fallen into countless times since childhood. But I wasn't a child anymore. And I wasn't just her pushover sister either. I was the owner of this building, and it was time to start acting like it. I want to show you something, I said, my voice suddenly calm. Right now! Olivia blinked, thrown by the abrupt change in my tone. What? Show me what? You'll see. Come with me. Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked out of the bedroom, through the apartment, and into the hallway. After a moment's hesitation, I heard her follow, closing the door behind her. Where are we going? She asked as I led her to the stairwell instead of the elevator. Up, I replied simply, pushing open the door and beginning to climb. She followed, reluctantly, asking questions that I ignored, her confusion gradually shifting to annoyance as we ascended flight after flight. By the time we reached the top floor, she was out of breath and patience. Seriously, Eliza, what are we doing up here? This is the penthouse level. We can't go up here. I turned to face her, key already in my hand. Actually, we can. Her eyes, fixed on the small gold key, narrowing in confusion. How do you have a key to the penthouse? That doesn't make any sense. Instead of answering, I turned and unlocked the double doors, pushing them open to reveal the stunning space beyond. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the empty rooms with a warm, golden glow that had been absent during my nighttime exploration. Olivia stepped inside hesitantly, her irritation momentarily forgotten as she took in the soaring ceilings, the panoramic views, the luxurious finishes. What is this? She breathed, moving toward the windows. How did you get access to this? I followed her into the great room, watching as she turned slowly, taking in every detail. It's exactly what it looks like, I said simply. The penthouse. Yes. I can see that, she replied, exasperation creeping back into her voice. But why do you have a key? Are you… Working with the building management now or something? I smiled faintly. Not exactly. She stared at me expectantly, waiting for an explanation. I moved to stand beside her at the windows, looking out at the view that had captivated me the night before. I bought the building, Olivia. For a moment, there was absolute silence. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head as she processed my words, searching for an alternative interpretation, some way to make sense of them other than their literal meaning. You… what? She finally managed. I bought the Horizon, the entire building, all 28 units, including this penthouse and our apartment downstairs. I signed the papers yesterday morning. She took a step back, her expression shifting, rapidly from confusion to disbelief to something more complex, a mixture of shock, suspicion, and the dawning realization that she had completely misjudged the situation. That's not possible, she said, shaking her head. You can't afford a building like this. Actually, I can, I replied calmly. Between my savings, the inheritance from Grandma, and a very favorable mortgage, it was well within my means. I've been working on the deal for months. Months? Her voice rose. You've been planning this for months and never said a word to me? I nodded. It was a complex transaction. I created an LLC, worked with attorneys, secured financing. It wasn't something I wanted to discuss until it was finalized. But why? She demanded, gesturing around the empty penthouse. Why would you buy an entire apartment building? It was a fair question, one I had asked myself repeatedly throughout the process. The answer had evolved over time, becoming clearer as the purchase moved from possibility to reality. Because I could, I said simply. Because it was a good investment. Because I was tired of living with the uncertainty of renting, of knowing our home could be sold out from under us at any moment. Because I wanted to have control over my own living situation. I paused, looking directly at her, which is ironic, considering what happened yesterday. The reference to her attempt to evict me wasn't lost on Olivia. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but her eyes remained defiant. So, this is all some elaborate power play? You secretly bought our building just so you could what? Lord it over me when I asked you to move out? I sighed, frustrated by her insistence on seeing this as a personal attack rather than the independent decision it had been. No, Olivia, the timing is coincidental. I had no idea you were planning to ask me to leave when I decided to buy the building. I was actually planning to celebrate with you last night. That's what the champagne was for. She glanced away, processing this information. So what now? She asked finally, her voice quieter. Are you going to evict me? Raise the rent until Dominic and I can't afford to stay? Of course not, I replied, surprised by the suggestion. You're my sister. I'm not going to use this as a weapon against you. I gestured to the empty space around us. I'm going to move up here, to the penthouse. It solves both our problems. You and Dominic get the apartment, and I get a new home. Her eyes widened. You're giving us the apartment? Just like that? I'm not giving it to you, I clarified. You'll still pay rent, the same amount you've been paying. I'm just moving out, which is what you wanted anyway. She was quiet for a long moment, looking around the penthouse with new eyes. Not just admiring its beauty, but calculating its value, reassessing me and my capabilities in light of this revelation. I don't understand, she said finally. This isn't like you, Eliza. Buying a building, moving into a luxury penthouse, these are big, impulsive decisions. You plan everything. You research and analyze and create spreadsheets for buying a coffee maker. But this… She gestured to encompass the building beneath us. This is huge. There was something in her tone I hadn't expected. Not just surprise or confusion, but a hint of something else. Was it respect, envy, concern? Perhaps a mixture of all three. People change, I said simply. Sometimes they surprise you. Apparently, she murmured, moving toward the terrace doors. placing her hand on the glass as if testing whether it was real. So all this time, while I thought you were just being boring, predictable Eliza with your investment reports and your early bedtimes, you were secretly becoming a property mogul? I smiled slightly at her characterization. I wouldn't go that far. It's one building, not an empire. But yes, I was working on something bigger than you realized. She turned to face me, her expression suddenly serious. Why didn't you tell me, Eliza? We live together. We're sisters. How could you keep something this significant from me? The question hit a nerve, exposing the contradiction in our current situation. The same way you could decide to kick me out of our apartment without discussing it with me first, I suppose, I replied, more sharply than I'd intended. We both made unilateral decisions that affected the other person. Her eyes dropped, a flash of guilt crossing her face. That's different, she said, but her protest lacked conviction. Is it? I asked quietly. You decided what you wanted and expected me to adapt. I decided what I wanted and kept it private until it was finalized. Both choices affected our living situation. Both choices revealed something about how we see each other. Olivia was silent, digesting this parallel. Finally, she looked up, her expression more vulnerable than I'd seen in years. What does this mean for us? She asked. And I knew she wasn't talking about the apartment or the building, but about our relationship. It was the question I'd been asking myself since I first considered buying the Horizon, one that had taken on new urgency since yesterday's confrontation. What did all of this mean for us? As sisters, as roommates, as adults trying to navigate the complex terrain of family and independence? I don't know yet, I admitted honestly. But I think it means we both have some growing to do. She nodded, slowly, looking out at the city stretching beyond the windows. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty rooms, highlighting the potential of the space, and perhaps, I hoped, illuminating the possibility of a new chapter in our complicated relationship. For the first time since receiving Olivia's demand to leave, I felt something close to optimism. Not because I had won some power struggle, but because we had reached a turning point, a moment of honesty that might, if we were careful with it, lead to genuine understanding. We spent the next hour exploring the penthouse together, our earlier, tension gradually dissolving as we moved through the empty rooms discussing potential furnishings and design choices. Olivia, ever the visual thinker, began sketching layout ideas on her phone, occasionally holding it up to frame different angles of the space. You could do something amazing with this terrace, she said as we stepped outside, her creative energy visibly building. Sectional seating here, maybe a pergola for shade, string lights along the perimeter. It would be perfect for entertaining. I smiled, watching her mind work. Despite our differences, I'd always admired Olivia's ability to see possibilities in empty spaces. I wasn't planning on much entertaining, she rolled her eyes. Of course not, but you should. This place deserves it. She walked to the edge, looking down at the street below. You really own all of this now, she said, her voice softer. It's still hard to believe. For me too, sometimes, I admitted, joining her at the railing. She turned to me, studying my face with unusual intensity. I'm sorry, she said finally. About barging into your room. About assuming you'd just go along with what I wanted. She glanced away, her fingers tapping the railing. I get so caught up in my own plans that I don't always consider how they affect other people. The apology surprised me. Olivia rarely acknowledged when she overstepped. Thank you, I said simply, accepting the olive branch without pressing for more. We fell silent, watching the afternoon traffic flow along Willow Street below. A flock of pigeons rose suddenly from a neighboring building, circling once before, settling on another rooftop. The moment felt fragile, a tentative peace I was reluctant to disrupt. Finally, Olivia spoke again. So, when are you moving up here? The practical question brought me back to reality. I'm not sure yet. The place needs furnishing, and I'll need to coordinate with the property management company about the change in occupancy. She nodded. Dominic can wait a few weeks. His lease isn't officially up until the end of next month. I appreciate that, I said, relieved that the immediate pressure was off. I'd rather not rush into this. We headed back downstairs to our apartment, the air between us easier than it had been in days. Olivia made tea while I called Stellar Properties to schedule a meeting about transitioning management responsibilities. By the time I hung up, she had placed 2 steaming mugs on the coffee table and was curled up on one end of the couch, scrolling through furniture websites on her tablet. I've found 3 sofas that would be perfect for your great room, she announced as I sat down, and a dining table that would complement the kitchen island. I picked up my tea, smiling at her enthusiasm. I haven't even decided on a color scheme yet. Neutral base, pops of color through accessories, she replied without hesitation. You can never go wrong with that approach. Besides, with views like those, you don't want competing visual elements. We spent the next hour in companionable discussion about furniture arrangements and paint colors, the earlier confrontation fading into the background. When Olivia left to meet a client for dinner, she promised to create a proper design board for the penthouse. Just some ideas, no pressure, and I found myself genuinely looking forward to her suggestions. Alone in the apartment, I finally opened the champagne I'd brought home the previous night. The cork popped with a satisfying sound, and I poured a single flute, raising it in a silent toast to new beginnings. The next morning, I woke with renewed purpose. The conversation with Olivia had cleared the air, at least temporarily, giving me space to focus on the practical aspects of my new role as building owner. I dressed with particular care, a charcoal pencil skirt and burgundy blouse that projected confidence without ostentation, and headed to my scheduled meeting with Stellar Properties. Their offices occupied the ground floor of a glass-fronted building in Meridian's financial district, all chrome accents and sleek minimalist furniture. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where Jacob Reynolds, the property manager assigned to the Horizon, was waiting with a stack of files and a wary expression. Ms. Chen? He greeted me, extending his hand. Congratulations on your purchase. Thank you, I replied, taking the offered seat. I appreciate you meeting with me on short notice. Jacob nodded, his professional smile not quite reaching his eyes. Of course, we're eager to understand your vision for the property. New owners often have significant changes in mind. I recognized the concern beneath his polite veneer. New ownership frequently meant disruption, for the management company, for existing staff, for tenants. I decided to address his unspoken fears directly. I don't plan to make dramatic changes to how the building is managed, I said, watching his shoulders relax slightly. The Horizon functions well under your company's oversight. What I'm looking for is a collaborative relationship as I learn more about property ownership. Over the next hour, Jacob walked me through the building's financials, maintenance schedules, tenant histories, and outstanding issues. I took meticulous notes, asking questions about everything from the HVAC system's expected lifespan to the protocol for handling noise complaints. By the end of our meeting, his initial wariness had given way to cautious optimism. You've clearly done your homework, he remarked as we reviewed the annual budget. Most new owners I've worked with haven't been this thorough. I smiled, recognizing the comment as both compliment and observation. I believe in understanding the details before making decisions. Before leaving, I broached the subject of my planned move to the penthouse and Olivia's continued tenancy in our current unit. Jacob made notes in his tablet, promising to prepare the necessary paperwork by the end of the week. Will you be hiring decorators for the penthouse setup? He asked. I can recommend several firms that have worked with our luxury properties. I shook my head. Not at this stage. I'm planning to furnish it gradually, starting with the essentials. What I didn't mention was that Olivia had already sent me a comprehensive design proposal during my commute to this meeting, complete with furniture selections, color swatches, and a surprisingly reasonable budget breakdown. Her text message, "Don't argue, this is my housewarming gift and apology," had made me smile despite myself. From Stellar's offices, I walked to a nearby furniture showroom that Olivia had recommended. The sales associate, a willowy woman, named Petra with an impressive knowledge of ergonomic seating, helped me select a bedroom set and living room essentials that could be delivered within 2 weeks. By the time I left, I had spent more on furniture in one day than I had in the previous 5 years combined, but the investment felt right, a commitment to my new life and home. The next week passed in a flurry of activity. During the day, I maintained my regular work schedule at Archer Capital, analyzing investment opportunities and managing client portfolios with my usual attention to detail. Evenings and weekends were devoted to penthouse preparations, ordering appliances, scheduling painters, coordinating deliveries. Olivia proved surprisingly helpful, offering design advice without being pushy and even accompanying me to select light fixtures and bathroom accessories. Our relationship had shifted subtly since my revelation, the power dynamic more balanced, our interactions less fraught with the old patterns of control and acquiescence. Dominic remained on the periphery of these preparations, stopping by, occasionally but mostly staying at his loft while we finalized the transition. I appreciated the space, though I recognized it was temporary. Soon enough, he would occupy my current bedroom, his drafting table replacing my desk, his presence becoming part of the apartment's daily rhythm. 10 days after revealing my ownership of the building, I stood in the empty penthouse, watching as painters applied the final coat to the master bedroom walls, a soft, warm gray that changed subtly with the light throughout the day. The furniture would arrive tomorrow, transforming the echoing space into something livable, if not yet fully home. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Abernathy in 2A. "Heard you're our new owner and new upstairs neighbor. Rooftop Garden Committee. Meeting next Tuesday. Your attendance requested. Bring wine." I smiled, still amazed at how quickly news traveled within the Horizon's walls. I hadn't made a formal announcement about the ownership change, preferring to let Stellar handle the official communication, but the building's unofficial information network had proven remarkably efficient. That evening, as I packed books into cardboard boxes in my soon-to-be former bedroom, Olivia appeared in the doorway with 2 glasses of wine. "Moving day is almost here," she said, handing me one of the glasses. "Nervous?" I accepted the wine, considering her question. "Not nervous, exactly. It's more adjustment. I've never lived alone before. First it was Mom and Dad's house, then college roommates, then you." She perched on the edge of my partially dismantled bed. "You'll be fine. Probably better than fine. You'll have your fancy penthouse with no one leaving dishes in the sink or using up all the hot water." She took a sip of wine, her expression thoughtful. "Though I have to admit, I'm going to miss you. Even your annoying organizational labels in the fridge." I laughed, surprised by the admission. "Those labels are practical, not annoying." "They're both," she insisted, but her tone was affectionate rather than critical. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the wine warming my chest, the familiar contours of our relationship settling into something new yet recognizable. "Have you told Mom and Dad yet?" Olivia asked suddenly. "About buying the building?" I shook my head. "I've been waiting until I'm settled in the penthouse. I thought I might invite them to visit once everything's set up." "They're going to freak out," she predicted with a grin. "In a good way, mostly. Dad will want to see all the financial details, and Mom will immediately start planning dinner parties you don't want to host." "Probably," I agreed, already imagining the scenario. Our parents would be surprised, certainly, but also proud. They had always encouraged both their daughters to pursue ambitious goals, even when those ambitions took very different forms. Olivia stood, reaching for my empty glass. "I should let you get back to packing. Dominic's coming over later to help measure for curtains. I handed her the glass, suddenly aware that these casual evening conversations in my bedroom would soon be a thing of the past. Thanks for the wine, and for being supportive about all of this. She paused at the door, her expression softening. You did something amazing, Eliza. Something I never would have expected from my play-it-safe big sister. She shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. Maybe we're both still figuring out who we really are. After she left, I returned to my packing, wrapping framed photographs in bubble wrap and sorting books into keep and donate piles. Each item I handled carried memories, some shared with Olivia, others entirely my own. The process felt both melancholy and liberating, a letting go and a moving forward wrapped into one methodical task. Tomorrow, the movers would arrive. Tomorrow, I would officially transition from tenant to resident owner, from roommate to solo dweller, from the person who always played it safe to someone who had taken a calculated but significant risk. As I sealed the last box of the evening, I realized that I wasn't just changing apartments. I was stepping into a new version of myself, one that had perhaps been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Moving day arrived with unexpected sunshine after a week of spring. Rain. The movers, two efficient men named Carlos and Trevor, who treated my belongings with surprising care, arrived promptly at 9. They worked methodically, transferring my life from the 4th floor to the penthouse in a steady stream of boxes and furniture. By mid-afternoon, they had departed, leaving me alone in my new space surrounded by cardboard boxes and the scent of fresh paint. I stood in the center of the great room, taking in the transformation. My furniture, which had seemed perfectly adequate, in our shared apartment, looked almost diminutive in the penthouse's generous proportions. The sofa that had dominated our previous living room now seemed like an island in a sea of hardwood flooring. My dining table, previously wedged against a wall to maximize space, now floated somewhat forlornly in the expansive dining area. Yet despite the slightly disorienting scale, there was something undeniably right about seeing my possessions in this space. My books filled only 2 of the built-in shelves flanking the fireplace, but their familiar spines brought immediate warmth. The framed photographs I'd placed on the mantel, hiking with my parents in Yosemite, Olivia and me at her college graduation, a group shot from a company retreat last summer, anchored the room in my history. I spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking essential items, making the bed with fresh linens, arranging my toiletries in the cavernous bathroom, organizing the kitchen with my modest collection of cookware and dishes. The physical work kept my mind occupied, preventing the occasional pangs of anxiety about this massive change in my living situation. Around 7, just as I was contemplating ordering takeout, a knock on the door interrupted my unpacking. I opened it to find Olivia balancing 2 large pizza boxes with a bottle of wine precariously tucked under one arm. "Housewarming," she announced, stepping past me into the penthouse. "I figured you wouldn't have time to cook, and you're probably starving." "You figured correctly," I admitted, relieving her of the pizza boxes and leading the way to the kitchen. "I haven't eaten since breakfast." Olivia set the wine on the counter and glanced around the space, taking in the partially unpacked boxes and mismatched furniture arrangement. "How's it going up here? Everything fitting okay?" "More or less," I said, retrieving plates from a box I'd just unpacked. "The scale is different. Everything seems smaller somehow." She nodded, opening cabinets until she found wine glasses. "That's going to take some getting used to. But it's also an opportunity. You can finally get real grown-up. Furniture, not just the hand-me-downs and discount store stuff we've been living with." "Hey, I like my discount store stuff," I protested, though without much conviction. The truth was, most of our furniture had been purchased with budget as the primary consideration, functionality second, and aesthetics a distant third. We settled, on the sofa with our pizza and wine, facing the wall of windows that now showcased a spectacular sunset view, bands of orange and pink stretching across the Meridian skyline, silhouetting the downtown buildings in dramatic relief. "Okay, the view alone is worth whatever you paid for this place," Olivia conceded, taking a sip of wine. "Though I still can't believe you actually bought the entire building. It's so un-Eliza." I laughed, relaxing for the first time that day. That's what everyone keeps saying. But maybe this is exactly who Eliza is. You all just didn't notice. She tilted her head, studying me with newfound curiosity. "Maybe," she acknowledged. "Or maybe you're evolving, just like the rest of us." We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the pizza surprisingly good after hours of physical labor. Through the windows, the sunset deepened to purple, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "So," Olivia said finally, setting down her plate, "I have news." Something in her tone made me look up sharply. "What kind of news?" She tucked her legs beneath her, suddenly looking younger, almost vulnerable. "Dominic proposed." For a moment, I couldn't process the words. "Proposed marriage?" She nodded, a mixture of excitement and apprehension in her expression. "Last night. It wasn't planned. At least I don't think it was. We were just talking about the move and the future, and suddenly he was on one knee with his grandmother's ring." "Wow," I managed, genuinely stunned. "That's fast." "I know," she admitted. 6 months isn't very long, but sometimes you just know, you know?" I nodded automatically, though I didn't know, had never experienced that kind of certainty about a relationship. My romantic history consisted of sensible, carefully considered partnerships that ultimately fizzled out when the practicalities of compatibility couldn't compensate for a lack of deeper connection. "Congratulations," I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "I'm happy for you." And I was, despite my reservations about the timeline. Olivia was radiant with the particular glow of someone deeply in love. And who was I to question that? "Thanks," she said, squeezing back. "There's more, though." Of course there was. With Olivia, there was always more. "We're moving to Seattle." The statement hung in the air between us, simple yet seismic. Seattle was over 1,000 miles away. A different climate, a different pace, a different life entirely. "Seattle," I repeated, buying time as I processed this new information. "Dominic's business?" She nodded. "He's been offered a creative director position at a design firm there. It's a huge opportunity. More money, more creative control, a chance to work on national campaigns." "When?" The word came out more abruptly than I intended. 2 months, she said. "They want him to start by August. We'll get married here before we go. Nothing fancy, just immediate family and a few close friends." My mind was racing, calculating implications. "But your clients, your freelance business, I can work from anywhere," she reminded me. "Most of my clients are remote already. And Seattle has a great design scene. I'll build a new client base there over time." She was right, of course. Olivia's career was portable in a way mine wasn't. And 2 months was a reasonable timeline, enough to plan a small wedding, pack up her life, and start fresh in a new city with her new husband. But it also meant that, after nearly 3 decades of having my sister within easy reach, she would suddenly be distant, accessible only through screens and occasional visits. The thought created a hollow feeling in my chest, an emptiness I hadn't anticipated. "I'll miss you," I said simply, voicing the most immediate truth. Her eyes softened. "I'll miss you too, but it's not like I'm moving to Mars. Seattle has airports. You have vacation time. We'll figure it out." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course we will." She leaned forward, fixing me with a serious look. "This is why I wanted to tell you tonight, not over text or while you were in the middle of unpacking. Because I need you to know that this isn't about getting away from you or Meridian or anything else. It's about following an opportunity, just like you did when you bought this building." The parallel wasn't lost on me. We were both making major life changes, stepping into new versions of ourselves. Mine involved putting down deeper roots. Hers involved pulling them up and replanting elsewhere. Different paths, but perhaps equally valid. I understand, I said, and meant it. I'm just processing. She laughed softly. That's such an Eliza thing to say. Processing. Like you're a computer running calculations. Well, it takes time to recalibrate expectations, I pointed out. I went from thinking you and Dominic would be living downstairs to realizing you'll be in another state entirely. Speaking of downstairs, she said, her expression turning thoughtful. What are you going to do with the apartment when we leave? Find new tenants? I hadn't thought that far ahead yet, but the question triggered my analytical instincts. Probably. The rental market's strong right now, or she hesitated, then continued. You could keep it vacant for a while. As a guest apartment, maybe. For when Mom and Dad visit, or if you eventually want to rent it out on a short-term basis for extra income. The suggestion was practical, financially sound. But I sensed something beneath it. An unspoken request, a door left deliberately ajar. For when you visit too, I added quietly. You'll always have a place to stay in Meridian. Her smile confirmed my intuition. I'd like that. The moment stretched between us, weighted with shared history and the uncertainty of our changing relationship. Then Olivia stood abruptly, gathering our empty plates. Enough sentimental stuff, she declared, moving toward the kitchen. Let's talk about this disaster of a furniture arrangement. Your sofa is facing the wrong way entirely, and that coffee table placement is a safety hazard waiting to happen. I laughed, grateful for the shift to more practical matters. By all means, rearrange away. You're the one with the design eye. For the next hour, Olivia directed me in repositioning furniture, unpacking specific boxes. Art first, Eliza. It immediately makes a space feel inhabited. And arranging my belongings in a way that somehow made the penthouse feel both more spacious and more like home. We worked together with the easy rhythm of siblings who had shared space for most of their lives, anticipating each other's movements, communicating in half-sentences and meaningful glances. By the time she left around 10, the penthouse had undergone a remarkable transformation. The furniture was arranged to create conversation areas that felt intimate, despite the room's scale. Books and objects were displayed thoughtfully on shelves, creating visual interest without clutter. Even my bedroom felt coherent, with the bed positioned to maximize both the view and the morning light. Not bad for a first night, Olivia said as she gathered her purse and phone. Text me if you get scared up here all alone. I rolled my eyes. I'll be fine. I know you will, she said, suddenly serious again. You're always fine. That's your superpower. After she left, I locked the door and wandered through my new home, still adjusting to the echoing sound of my footsteps against hardwood floors, and the vastness of rooms designed for a life much grander than the one I'd been living. Outside on the terrace, the night air was cool against my skin. The city spread out below, a tapestry of lights and shadows, each pinpoint representing another life, another story playing out in parallel to mine. Somewhere down there, Olivia was driving home to our old apartment, probably already texting Dominic about her sister's bizarre furniture and the incredible view from the penthouse. In 2 months, she would be married. In 2 months, she would leave Meridian for a new life in Seattle. And I would remain here, in this building I now owned, watching over the community of residents who had no idea their landlord was the quiet woman from 4C who now lived in the penthouse. The realization brought a strange mixture of emotions, pride in our respective journeys, anxiety about the changes ahead, and a quiet confidence that despite the distance, Olivia and I would find new ways to maintain our connection. I looked up at the stars, unusually visible tonight in the clear urban sky. The universe had a peculiar sense of timing, giving me ownership of a building just as my sister decided to leave it, granting me a spacious penthouse just as I found myself preparing to live truly alone for the first time. But perhaps that wasn't coincidence at all. Perhaps it was exactly what both of us needed: space to become the women we were meant to be, whether that meant putting down roots or spreading wings. I took one last deep breath of night air before heading inside, ready for my first night as the solitary resident of the penthouse, the owner of the horizon, and a woman still discovering the dimensions of her own capacity for change. 6 months have passed since I moved into the penthouse. 6 months since Olivia announced her engagement and impending relocation. 6 months of growth, adjustment, and unexpected discoveries. Autumn has settled over Meridian Heights, transforming Parkview Park into a canvas of gold and crimson. From my terrace, I watch the seasonal shift with a sense of contentment that would have surprised my former self. The woman who meticulously planned every detail of her life, who avoided risk at all costs, who defined herself primarily through caution, has evolved into someone who embraces uncertainty with something approaching enthusiasm. The penthouse has become truly mine in ways I couldn't have anticipated when I first stood in its empty rooms. The furniture Olivia helped me select arrived gradually over the summer, pieces chosen for both beauty and function, creating a space that reflects my evolving aesthetic. The terrace now boasts container gardens with herbs and seasonal flowers, the pergola Olivia suggested draped with outdoor lights that create a magical atmosphere on clear evenings. I've hosted dinner parties, something I never imagined myself doing. Small gatherings at first: Yasmin from work, Mrs. Abernathy from 2A, the Kumar family from 5B. The first time I invited guests, I spent 3 days planning the menu and cleaning already spotless rooms. Now I can throw together a last-minute Sunday brunch for the building's garden committee without a second thought. Owning the horizon has changed me in other ways as well. I've come to know the residents not just as names on leases, but as individuals, with stories, needs, and contributions to our small community. When the elevator broke in August, I personally called each tenant to apologize for the inconvenience and arranged for grocery delivery services for our elderly residents until repairs were completed. When Marcus and David from 6D welcomed a baby girl through adoption in September, I organized a building-wide collection for a gift basket and offered them a flexible payment plan when David took extended parental leave. These weren't calculated business decisions, but natural expressions of the responsibility I feel toward the people who call this building home. Jacob from Stellar Properties remarked during our quarterly review that tenant satisfaction scores have increased significantly, with several residents specifically mentioning the improved sense of community. "Whatever you're doing," he told me, "it's working. Buildings with this level of tenant retention are extremely rare in today's market." What I'm doing, I realized, is treating the horizon not just as an investment, but as a living ecosystem, one that thrives when its members feel secure, connected, and valued. My professional life has evolved as well. 3 months ago, I approached my boss at Archer Capital with a proposal to develop a dedicated division focused on sustainable real estate investments. The experience of purchasing and managing the horizon had revealed a gap in the market, a need for investment strategies that prioritize community stability alongside financial returns. To my surprise, he embraced the concept enthusiastically. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need," he said, reviewing my carefully prepared presentation. "And you're uniquely positioned to lead the initiative, given your first-hand experience." Last week, the board approved funding for the new division, with me as its director. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and the opportunity to build my own team. When I called my father to share the news, his pride was palpable even through the phone line. "I always knew you were capable of remarkable things," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You just needed to find the right catalyst." The catalyst, ironically, had been Olivia's attempt to evict me. the crisis that pushed me to reveal my ownership of the building and, in doing so, step fully into the power of my decision. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if she hadn't decided Dominic needed my bedroom. Would I have continued living in our shared apartment, my ownership of the building a secret? Would I have eventually moved to the penthouse anyway? Or would I have remained in a holding pattern, neither fully embracing nor rejecting the bold choice I'd made? These questions have no answers, of course. Life unfolds according to its own peculiar logic, presenting opportunities disguised as problems and revelations masquerading as setbacks. Olivia and Dominic married in July, a small ceremony in our parents' backyard followed by a reception at a local restaurant. She was radiant in a sleeveless ivory dress she designed herself, her happiness so evident it seemed to create its own gravitational field, drawing everyone into its orbit. I stood beside her as maid of honor, delivering a toast that made her laugh and cry in equal measure. "To my sister," I said, raising my glass, "who has always known what she wants and pursued it with unwavering determination. May your boldness continue to inspire those around you, especially those of us who sometimes need a push toward our own courage." They moved to Seattle in August as planned. Their apartment in Fremont, which Olivia has transformed through color and texture into a space uniquely their own, overlooks a canal where boats drift past in endless parade. When I visited last month, she showed me around her new neighborhood with contagious enthusiasm, introducing me to her favorite coffee shop, the farmer's market where she buys flowers each Sunday, the small design studio where she's begun collaborating with local artists. "Are you happy?" I asked as we sat on a bench overlooking the water, watching seabirds wheel against the backdrop of distant mountains. "Deliriously," she confirmed, her smile genuine. "It's different here. The pace, the light, the culture. Sometimes I miss Meridian, and I definitely miss you. But this feels right for us, you know?" I did know. Just as my decision to anchor myself more firmly in Meridian Heights felt right for me. We had chosen divergent paths, yet somehow those paths seemed perfectly aligned with our essential natures. Olivia embracing novelty and fresh perspective, me building depth and connection within a chosen community. Our relationship has evolved as well. The physical distance has encouraged more intentional communication, weekly video calls that often stretch for hours, daily text exchanges that range from mundane updates to profound reflections. We listen to each other more carefully now, perhaps because our interactions are no longer embedded in the familiar rhythms of shared space, where communication can become habitual rather than deliberate. "You know what's weird?" Olivia said during our call last night. "I think we're closer now than when we lived together." I had been thinking the same thing, but was surprised to hear her articulate it. "How so?" "When we shared the apartment, it was easy to assume we knew what was happening in each other's lives. We saw the surface stuff, the comings and goings, the daily habits, but we didn't always take the time to understand what was beneath all that." She was right. Proximity had sometimes substituted for genuine connection. Now, separated by hundreds of miles, we make deliberate efforts to remain present in each other's lives, to share not just events but the emotions and insights that accompany them. The apartment Olivia and I once shared remains vacant, though not for lack of potential tenants. I've maintained it, as we discussed, as a guest space for when she visits, when our parents come to town, or when friends need temporary accommodations. The room that was once mine, the space Dominic had planned to use for his drafting table, now serves as a comfortable guest bedroom, the walls repainted in a soothing sage green that complements the morning light. Sometimes I visit the apartment, alone, sitting in the familiar living room where so many pivotal conversations took place. The space holds echoes of our shared history, arguments and reconciliations, celebrations and quiet evenings, the gradual accumulation of moments that shaped us individually and collectively. I don't cling to these memories as much as honor them, acknowledging their role in the ongoing story of who we are becoming. This evening, as I prepare for a small dinner gathering on my terrace, I find myself reflecting on the unlikely sequence of events that transformed my life. The initial fear when I learned the horizon was being sold, the bold decision to purchase it myself, the shock of Olivia's attempt to evict me, the revelation of my ownership, the cascade of changes that followed. None of it unfolded according to plan. Certainly not my methodical, risk-averse plan for how my life should proceed. Instead, it evolved through a series of responses to unexpected circumstances, each choice opening doors I hadn't known existed. The doorbell chimes, announcing my first guests. I take a final glance around the penthouse, the space that still occasionally surprises me when I wake in the morning, momentarily disoriented by the sweep of windows and the expanse of sky beyond. Then I move to welcome my visitors, this gathering of neighbors and colleagues who have become something more than either category suggests. As I open the door, I'm struck by a sudden clarity. The true value of owning the horizon has never been the financial investment or even the beautiful penthouse. It's been the opportunity to discover capacities within myself I might otherwise never have recognized. The ability to take calculated risks, to navigate conflict with grace, to build community through genuine care and attention. My sister kicked me out of our shared apartment, not knowing I'd just bought the building. The irony of that situation still makes me smile. But the greater irony is this. In attempting to displace me, she inadvertently helped me find my place. Not just physically, but in the deeper sense of understanding who I am and what I'm capable of becoming. As my guests enter, exclaiming over the view and the autumn-themed table setting I've arranged on the terrace, I feel a profound gratitude for all of it. The conflicts and resolutions, the losses and discoveries, the intricate, unpredictable journey that continues. To unfold with each choice, each connection, each step into the unknown. The person I was 6 months ago could never have imagined the woman I am becoming. And the woman I am becoming remains curious about who I might yet be, given time and the courage to continue embracing change. That, perhaps, is the most valuable lesson in all of this. That life's most meaningful transformations often begin with moments that appear, at first glance, to be problems rather than opportunities. My sister kicked me out of our shared apartment, not knowing I'd just bought the building. And in doing so, she gave me the final push I needed to claim not just the property, but the potential that had been waiting inside me all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.